If we're to look at the beginnings of America and look at it from a Christian perspective and try to understand where did our Christian roots come from, I think it's important that we go back and we look at the Puritans. The Puritans had a great impact on America, not only in terms of religion, particularly what we think of as Christianity, and what we think of as morality in the beginning, but also in terms of politics. Both are important aspects of the Puritans' impact on America in the beginning. So even if you look at the historical interpretation of the Puritans and what role they had in society in terms of the founding, and what did people later on in the later 1600s, the 1700s, and the 1900s would have to say about the Puritans' founding. If you look, for the most part, the 19th and 20th century Americans, for example, would still say that the Puritans were a big part of America's founding. And this can go back to the very beginnings. If we look at when they landed, and we look at it in terms of a political contribution, the idea that the Puritans had on the need to come together to form a government was one of the most important contributing factors that the Puritans would give America. They pledged to create a civil authority in the Mayflower Compact. This would be a form of a representative government. They chose their leaders. And they did this because that's what they believed was best, based on their beliefs, their Christian beliefs, their interpretation of the Bible, based on what the Old Testament had given them. And they looked at the Bible as an important covenant between God and Israel, but also between God and them. And so if they were to honor, or rather if God was going to bless them in their endeavor, then they needed to bless God. And so they would form a civil authority. And the Mayflower Compact would even say that they were to, quote, enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and officers from time to time as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony. And so they realized that they have to come together and form a government if they were to enact their purpose here in the New World. And so if we look at their Puritanism's important contributions for politics, we can see this through the Mayflower Compact. Francis Beamer, who is a scholar who has written a lot about the Puritans' contribution to America's beginnings, in an article about the views that Americans have had since the 1630s on Winthrop and his contribution beginning in the 1630s and moving forward, would claim that Winthrop's position as a leading figure in American foundings has waned and waxed through the years. Brimmer says that Winthrop's contribution to American republicanism, which is a common interpretation, became the primary reason for praising Winthrop and the Puritans. And this is in the 19th century that we see this, and even before in the 17th and 18th century. This is what the foremost thought was, that we associated Winthrop and his Puritan settlement in Massachusetts as a forerunner to the American Republic. And so, speakers and writers saw a spirit of liberty as the true genius, that New England and its town meetings as the seedbed of American democracy. And so for the longest periods of American history, we've looked back to Winthrop and the Puritans as the beginnings of our democracy. Not to say that we have always held this view, because our views have changed, but for the most part, the majority of the consensus is that the Puritans gave us our representative democracy. And they recognized that they were creating a new society in the presence of God. And I think this is important because when they came together to form the government out of the Mayflower Compact, and they came here to America to create their new society, they recognized that they weren't doing this on their own. They recognized that they were doing this in the presence of God. And so, if we look at the Puritans in terms of politics and their influence, then yes, they had a great influence by recognizing the presence of America in the presence of God. Even to this day, most presidents will end a speech with God bless and America. And so we could see this as an influence that starts all the way back with the Puritans. Not only political, but there were moral contributions that the Puritans made to our beginnings. They believed that they had a God-given responsibility to spread the gospel. This was their primary reason for coming, to practice their own faith as they saw fit without the interference of the crowd. And so they desired to spread the gospel to the people that were here once they had established themselves. They would seek refuge in the New World as they desired to spread their faith. They figured this is the best way they could do it. And so they were going to create a place where they could show the rest of the world what a true Christian community is. They were going to be Winthrop's city on a hill, in other words. This is based on their interpretation of Scripture. And they wanted to create a community that showed the world what a moral Christian environment should look like, not just one that's Christian in name only. And so for a good portion of the historiography of the Puritans and their contributions, we do look and we do see that there is a moral contribution that they made. Many historians have found this.